Hey everyone, I just wanted to put this video together because in one of the recent Tuesday techniques sessions, a question was asked about adding a full tummy adjustment to the Seamwork Margo Pencil Skirt pattern. And I wanted to just show you my approach to how I would do that. So this is my video for that hack. So my name's Jackie Blakemore of So Much More Fun, and this video is to look at how you can adjust sewing patterns to add a full tummy adjustment. So if you find that your tummy is a bit more rounded and you don't want to draw attention to it, sometimes the fabric from your dress or your skirt can kind of hug your tummy and go underneath it, and that just draws a bit more attention. So what this adjustment does is it gives a little bit more room and a little bit more fabric in that area. And in particular, I'm doing this on the Seamwork Margo pattern because the adjustment that I did show in one of the Tuesday Techniques videos, which you can go and have a look at on the website or on the Facebook page, assumes that you're doing a pattern that already has a dart in it or something like that. So the Seamwork Margo pattern doesn't have any darts. It's got a yoke which goes around your tummy, which is a really nice shaped yoke, and then the skirt kind of comes away from that. So you can still do this adjustment, but I just wanted to show you some tips and tweaks to be able to use that modification for this particular pattern. So I've got a half scale version of the pattern here. So this is the kind of top part of the pattern, and then there's no waistband, but then it's designed for this bodice, this yoke part to go onto the top of the bodice piece here. And so you would start out by preparing your pattern. So I would cut this out and trace it off. And then the next step is to remove the seam allowances for this particular adjustment. And the reason for that is because what we want to be able to do is join these two pieces together to start with to make the modification. And then what we're going to do is add the seam allowance back in once we've made our adjustments. So step one is get your pattern. I'm using the large size here, but decide what size you want to use. Trace that off or cut that out, and then mark on the seam allowance. Now on this pattern it's 3/8 of an inch, so just be aware of that. So I think that's 1 centimetre, something like that. So so if you mark on here kind of around the edges, and the areas that we want to mark are down the side of the yoke, so on the side seam, and then along this bottom edge of the yoke, so you want to mark the seam allowance there. And then on the bodice part, on the skirt part, you want to do the top of the waist seam here, so mark your seam allowance there, and then down the side seam. So there isn't a seam allowance here because this is going on the fold, this is the centre front, and we're not worried about this top section here at the moment. We're not going to make any adjustments to that. You could take the seam allowance off there if that helps you to do that. So I've done that, and what happens then is that once you've removed the seam allowance, what you should find is that these top two pieces pretty much fit together. Mine's not quite perfect, but you'll see that it does pretty much go together, kind of one on top of the other. And so now we've got a straight bodice piece a straight skirt piece that we can use to make our adjustments. So we're going to start to have a look at that. Now, there is no dart here, but that doesn't really matter. We can put in an artificial place where we would want the dart to go. So a couple of things to note when you're making your full tummy adjustment. The first is when you look at, if you try your toile on and you see that it's pulling at the sides, what you can do is just release the side seam a little bit and then let that go. So if I just stand up to show you. So if I've got a toile and it's pulling on the front, then what you can do is just release the side seam in the area where it's starting to pull. So from just underneath where your kind of waist seam is, and then just open it out kind of about a few inches to wherever it stops pulling. What that will do is if you do that on both sides, then as you wriggle around, you'll see how much the skirt needs to come forward. And if you measure that distance at the side, that will tell you how much you need to make in the adjustment. The other thing that you want to do is also look at how far down is the biggest gap, because that's really where we want to make the biggest part of the adjustment. So measure that on yourself, see how many inches that is, and then we can use that when we come to transfer it to the pattern. The other thing that you could do is measure down to where the fullest part of your tummy is and where it starts to drop away kind of after the bottom of your tummy. So again, if you measure from your waist to the fullest part, again, that distance can help in terms of where you're going to make your adjustment. Okay, so now that we've got our pattern kind of prepared and ready, the way that we're going to make the adjustment, we're going to follow along the same lines that we did for the in the Tuesday techniques video. So making the same adjustments. So I'm just going to swap my camera over so you can see that. Okay, so in this view, what you can see is we've got our original tummy adjustment. This is kind of like our end goal, really. So what we want to do here is, because we don't have a dart, we're just going to mark a position. So this is where, if you measure on yourself from the center of your tummy out to sort of where the roundness starts to drop away, then that's the distance where you want to make this first mark. So here, I'm just going to draw, let's say that's a few inches out. I'm just going to draw a straight line down from there to artificially represent our dart, as it were. So we've got no seam allowance on here, so we're going to go from this top corner and we're going to pick a point on, you know, however far down. So this measurement down from here is going to be that measurement that we said where your tummy starts to drop away, or where the biggest adjustment is on the hip, where the biggest gap is. So measure that distance down and just mark that on your, I don't know, let's say for me it's about 2 inches. Mark your mark that point on your line. So I'm just going to recap on that. Let me just change my camera back. So this distance from the centre front is, if you're looking at your tummy, kind of where it starts to, where the rounding starts to fall away, that distance is the measurement that you want there. That corresponds to this distance from the centre front. In terms of the length down, if you've measured your tummy and where your tummy starts to fall away, that distance that you've got there, that's this distance down from here. If that doesn't make sense as a measurement, then you can also use the place where the biggest gap forms when you kind of release the side seam. So again, that's this distance kind of from the top to here. So hopefully that makes sense. I'll just go back and make our adjustment. So now we're just going to make exactly the same change that we made on this original one. So we're going to join the line from here. I'll use this orange pen. Join the line from here to here through both of our pieces. Okay, so we're kind of working through. You'll see, because my line goes longer than my first, just the yoke, so we can see that. And then I'm going to come out in a straight line to the center front. Okay. So you'll know, based on how big the gap was when you released the side seam, how much you need to add on here. I'm just going to grab a piece of card. I can show you that. Okay. So if we put this under here, then you can see the difference. Okay, so the same as we did before, we're going to cut along here and up to the corner. So you might just want to make sure, I'm just going to double check mine's kind of taped together, and I can separate it out later. So I'm just going to cut along here and then up towards the corner, but not through the corner. So we want to leave a little hinge point like we did before. And then we want to cut down from our kind of fake, down from our fake dart there. Okay, so if we secure our the kind of main body of our pattern to our bit of card here, and then like we did before, we can measure out. So let's say you decide the gap that formed was 1 inch and you need to add half an inch, or in my case that would be kind of, because it's half scale, it would be 1/4 of an inch. So I'm just going to draw a line. I'm lining up my ruler with the edge of the center front, and I'm just going to draw a line that's 1/4 of an inch. If you haven't got a see-through ruler, then you can just mark a couple of points along your line and then just join those up. So just to show you that. And then we're just going to join that line and kind of extend it up further to the top. Okay, so as we did before, what we're now going to do with our top piece is we're going to pull this out so that it lines up with the new line that we want to add for the width, to add the extra width. So again, I'm just sort of keeping my finger on this hinge point. I might just cut that a little bit more. It's not quite going flat. There we go. So we want to make sure everything's flat, and you want to make sure this is lined up with this straight line here, this flat edge here. So can you see that? See that there? Okay. Now you could make this easiest for yourself if what you do is make this line kind of finish where your yoke is. But if your line does need to come longer, then this kind of shows you a combination of the two. So what we're going to do now is we can trace this off again, and this will give us our new shape. And then there's one last adjustment that we need to make. So we need to decide what we're going to do with this yoke piece here. So what I would do is, can you see how this line has gone up from where the original yoke line was? So I probably would just extend this and make my own new yoke piece from this pattern. So if I just join that up here, if you can see what I mean. Okay, and then I would mark where my dart is, because what we want to be able to do is close this out, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. So our kind of new yoke pattern piece sort of looks a bit like this, and then our new bodice, our new kind of skirt piece looks like this. So so if I was to cut these out, just to show you that. So imagine this is going all the way down. So you would trace this off now, and this becomes your new skirt piece. So your new skirt piece has some extra length, and you would have to add your seam allowance back on, which I'll show you in a second. So I would cut this now, and I'm cutting along the original line that I had for the yoke, and then my newly drawn line that's been extended. So this is my new kind of skirt piece. And then see, that would go down there. And then you can see now that my new skirt piece has some extra in the area where I want this extra length and slight extra width to go over the full tummy. So that would be your this kind of shape of your new skirt piece. So that's how that would look. Okay. In terms of the yoke piece, what we would do is, if we also cut this out, I'm just going to stick this on here so I can show you. So I'm just going to cut around this for now, just to show you. But like we mentioned with facing pieces, we don't tend to have darts in these kind of pieces. And the beauty of this is that the length of it pretty much goes down to the bottom of the yoke piece. So what we can do, after we've decided where our dart is, rather than have a dart that we sew, we can just fold it out of this piece here. So we can fold that back out, because that is where our adjustment would be. And can you see now that gives us a nice clean yoke shape that will fit at the bottom. So you can just kind of tidy up this line here just a tiny bit. But you get your nice yoke piece. It's now got the dart built into it, so you can see that that's incorporating the dart, but you've still added a bit of extra at the side to be able to just cater for your tummy, and the roundness kind of going across the fullness of your tummy. So that's the kind of shape, the new shape of our yoke piece. So just to recap there, all we've done is, where we would have sewn a dart, because this is a separate pattern piece, and because of the length of the dart, we can actually just fold it out, so we don't need to sew it. We can kind of build it into the pattern piece. So now the bottom part will still line up and the top part will still line up, but can you see also they don't? Now we're going to create some shaping. So when we sew this together, it's actually going to go nicely over your tummy. So it's kind of adding that shaping in between the yoke and the bodice. So it's going to kind of wrap around. Can you see how when I join those together, it's already creating that lovely curve to accommodate any extra tummy that you might have, and it's going to kind of fold over that. So this is a really lovely way to be able to kind of incorporate it, build it in, and you wouldn't see it either. So you're not going to draw any attention to your tummy by making this adjustment. It's going to look nice and smooth. So the last thing that you would do then is add back on your seam allowance. So to do that, stick it again on another piece of paper, and then just add on your, so you would measure that, probably measure that out. And then just add on whatever your seam allowances it is back onto the places where we cut it off. So that is the bottom edge of the yoke, for example. So your finished piece would be like that. And then this side piece here, you'd be adding it on as well. And then the same, add it back on here and back on at the side seam. Yeah, so just to recap that again. So you're going to add seam allowance at the side seam. So add your 3/8 back on and add it back on to your pattern piece at this bottom edge here. Then you're also going to add it on at the side seam on this pattern piece, and then on the top of this pattern piece here. And then when you sew them together now, that will give you that lovely shape, and they should all line up. So hopefully that makes sense, and that was just to cover this very specific piece. I think it works really nicely. Like I say, I really love the shaping that this gives, because it's incorporating that dart into this seam, which is a beautiful way to do that. So like we said before, you're bringing this gap to then create this shaping, which will, once they're joined up, will create a lovely nice shape over your tummy. Without drawing any attention to it. And this front piece will sit much flatter and won't kind of curve under or pull across. So if you have any questions or any feedback on this, then I'd love to know. I'll put this video onto the Facebook page and onto the website. And then if you've got any comments or questions, you can email me or you can leave a comment. hello@SewMuchMoreFun. Hope you found this useful and catch you again soon.